Okay, we are at the Hill County Performing Arts Center. It's not exactly standing room only. There are still some people eating in the room next door. They provided a light lunch. So they're getting set up on the stage, and I was going to walk y'all through the little program they've got. And I did take pictures of each page, and you can see this on my Facebook page on the previous post today. President of Southwest Engineers, LLC. Larry McManus, Director for Business and Community Development in the Office of the Governor. No bias there. Eric Meier, Supervisor of Planning Model Administration at ERCOT. And on the back, Carlton Schwab, President and CEO of the Texas Economic Development Council. So, no live questions. So I am inviting people to meet me outside, and if they have any questions or perspectives to share, they can do so at the end of this video. So I'm going to go find my seat. Make sure you share this with any of the data center groups across the state of Texas. This is one of those kinds of panels that is being held at Hillsboro, but is applicable statewide. You think I should sit over there? Oh yeah. It might actually be better if I did a video from that angle too. Yeah, I'll move because the chairs are angled that way. Okay. All right. I'll stay here. You go over there then. Okay. Yes, I am. Busy. I was arguing with my husband. Well, not so much arguing, discussing.
Started. Welcome. I want to thank everyone for being here at our fourth, almost annual Go Hillsborough Summit. I want to share a little bit about who Go Hillsborough is to bring this together. Go Hillsborough is a group of stakeholders, community members in Hillsborough that meet every other month to just talk, have conversations about what we're all seeing from our respective clients, audiences, etc. Identify opportunities, identify challenges, and work together to see if we can't pull together resources to educate, like we're doing here today, and find solutions to this. So once a year, we put together the Hill County Summit, and with that, we look to identify something that's happening regionally. So in the past, we've heard from the comptroller, we've had a demographer here. Our most recent summit had an economist. And as we all know, data centers are a very hot topic right now throughout the county. So we thought this was a great opportunity to get some facts about these things that are very foreign to us and certainly to this community, and learn from that while we're making these really important decisions that are going to have lasting implications for generations to come. So I'm very thankful to these guys for being here to share their expertise and their knowledge with us here today. You have their bios in a little program that we have. If you did not get one, please get one on the way out. I'm not going to read them all just because these guys have done a lot, and so I would use up half the time. But I'm going to share just a couple highlights. Eric Meier is the supervisor of the Planning Model Administration at ERCOT. He works across the grid operations and transmission planning domains with experience in transmission, planning, grid modeling, and simulation, large load integration, software development, and leading engineering teams. He's been involved in the integration of emerging large loads in ERCOT since they first began connecting to the system, and is focused on how to address the challenges of reliability integrating large loads. Larry McManus is the Director for Business and Community Development in the Office of the Governor, Economic Development and Tourism Division. He's responsible for the management of the office's existing industry and business recruitment activities, small business, international, marketing, research, and community relations initiatives. He's also previously served as the Senior Director for Rural Economic Development at the Department of Agriculture for the state. John Littlefield is president of Southwest Engineers, LLC, and he has 30 years of experience leading the development of water supply systems, regional transmission infrastructure, and wastewater facilities that serve both rural communities and high-growth corridors, of which we are both. His work spans groundwater and surface water development, large diameter transmission systems, storage and pumping facilities, and system expansions designed to meet evolving demand pressures. They are currently focused on how to sustainably meet accelerating water demand driven by urbanization and large-scale industrial users while protecting the long-term viability of communities. And our moderator today is Mr. Carlton Schwab. He has been the president and CEO of the Texas Economic Development Council since February 1st of 1999. And during that time, the 1,000-member TEDC has developed into a recognized leader in the professional development of its members and a powerful voice for economic development policy in the state of Texas. I will also say, as a TEDC member, that it's not just a leader in Texas, but really a model for other states to learn how to do what we do better. Carlton has a long experience leading a team that provides professional development and continued education for economic developers to continue to know how to handle new technology, new industry that are coming to town, and how to support our communities in some intentional and healthy growth. So thank you all for being here, and I hope everyone enjoys.
Well, let's jump right in, and thank you, Jessica. Thank you for inviting me and the panel here today. I'm just as curious as I think maybe many of you all are to learn more than what I've just read in internet accounts about data centers, because so much of what you read may not be believable. So much of it may be believable. But we've got experts here today, experts that work in the field, experts that know the landscape, and this issue is literally statewide at this point. So timely for Hill County, timely for the state of Texas, timely for the country, because this is one of those economic development issues that you really rarely see, in that it's something that's, at least in the lower 48 states, is something that everybody is dealing with at this point in time. So let's get started. I'm gonna start with Eric, and then we'll kind of go from there. So Eric, if you could explain what a data center is, how is it different from like wind and solar power, and what's the life cycle of a data center?
Certainly. So before we get started, I do just want to take a moment to recognize, the strong working relationship between Representative Orr, her staff, and her CUP. So we're deeply committed to our partnership with her district, and the Texas legislature as a whole. We're working together to face a lot of these issues across the state as we work to connect major loads like data centers. And we're trying to do this in a way that maintains reliability for all Texans, while also spurring economic development across the state, as you so well mentioned. So when we come to a data center, these are really facilities that provide the backbone of our digital society today. A lot of them are processing transactions for your credit cards, your email, if you use Gmail or Outlook or something like that. And every time you go to Google or Bing or whatever your web engine of choice is, anytime you do something on the web, you're interacting with the data center, whether it's on your computer or your phone. So these facilities provide the compute power, the storage, the hardware necessary to support all that. And that's sort of embedded in our day-to-day life all the time. I'm sure everybody here has a phone in their pockets. You use it many times a day. I know I do, probably more than I should, but that's just the way it is. So data center life cycle, we're looking at, somebody says, hey, I need a data center for a computing company, or they're going to try to provide services. So they're going to come in, try to figure out, where can we build this? Where's their land? Where's their power? Where's their water? Once they can secure all that, they'll go forward, they'll get the contracts for all those things, they'll start construction, and then eventually, that facility's in operations for probably a couple decades, depending on the facility. They're constantly refreshing it and upgrading it throughout its life cycle. And then there reaches a point where that facility no longer serves its needs, because maybe the new generation of equipment is too heavy for the foundation or something. And then they'll eventually decommission it or convert it to some other type of facility.
Great. Larry, this next one's for you. One of the reasons we're here is that data centers, the demand for them is skyrocketing. Why now? Why Texas? And why are rural areas being targeted or sought? Why Hill County, for that matter?
So in Texas, we're very fortunate to be in the state we're in. We're centrally located in the United States, centrally located Western Hemisphere, easy to get to around the world. The state of Texas has a lot of land, right? There's 1,200 cities across the state of Texas, each community responsible for its own economic growth, its own economic well-being, its own economic strategy. This is all part of the strategy of a community, determining what type of industries, what type of businesses you want in your community. The data center world is growing because artificial intelligence is a new technology that's driving this process. And in the United States is basically competing against China to be the leader in this. And it comes down to a national security issue. And so what these companies are looking for is they're looking for places to put the data centers. And from the United States standpoint, the United States wants to be the leader in this. And for Texas, part of our strategic plan in Texas, and you can view our strategic plan on the governor's economic development website. If you Google that, you'll find the economic development strategic plan. One of the target sectors is information technology, of which artificial intelligence is a part of. Semiconductor industry is a part of that. There are 10 different target sectors that the state as a whole pursues. Now, not every community pursues all those 10. Each community has its own assets, each community has its own workforce and its own resources, so they determine what makes sense. But as a whole, the state of Texas has identified this as a industry that it wants to pursue. So companies are identifying that Texas wants to grow, Texas wants to be pro-business. The regulatory environment in Texas is very favorable to companies, and they see that. So we also have power, right? Luckily we have ERCOT that's kind of going through a process to make sure that we continue to have power for residential and commercial business. And because of all that, compared to any other state, Texas is able to get data centers up and going quicker than other states. So that's a lot of the reasons that we're seeing those type of data centers. Data centers themselves are of different sizes. The one in Abilene, the Stargate project, is massive, going to create about 1,700 jobs. But there are data centers that create 50 jobs. And for rural communities, the amount of investment for a data center adds tax revenues to your community. And depending on the size of the workforce, it may not need as much. The services that it provides, the revenue that it provides compared to the services outweigh the dollar amount that is expended for that. So it tends to be a benefit for some communities, and each community has to make a determination on whether or not it's right for them.
Good stuff, Larry. And by the way, if you geek out on strategic plans, I've seen a lot of attempts at a statewide economic development strategic plan. The best one by far is the one you all completed last year. So if you're into that kind of stuff, go on the website, check it out. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and
y'all did a fabulous job.
Yeah, and that strategic plan used strategic plans from across the state. So the communities, the economic development stakeholders at the local levels were involved in establishing that strategic plan.
Well done. Okay, back to you, Eric. Can you explain the difference between pulling power from the grid versus behind the meter power, and what is bridge power? And then I've got a bunch of other questions related to power, so put you on the spot.
Yeah, those are some great questions, and I think to provide some background to what the answer is, let me explain a little bit about ERCOT and what we do. So ERCOT, or Electric Reliability Council of Texas, we're responsible for managing the flow of power across the state to 27 million people, which is about 90% of Texas. You know, we're a nonprofit, we're overseen by the Public Utility Commission and the legislature. It's really important to note that we do not own any generation assets, we do not own any load, we do not own any transmission. So when you go outside, you see those power lines, you know, those are owned by companies like Encore, who's primarily the power distributor up here. So something to, you know, keep in mind is we're like air traffic control for the grid and the financial market all rolled into one. We manage those financial transactions, and we work with all these transmission and companies across the state, power companies, to ensure that it's reliable. So our core functions are in system planning, you know, running competitive markets, weatherization inspections. So data centers, when you ask how do they deliver power, that is a very important question for system planning and for, you know, those kind of market things. So when we say, you know, bridge power pulling from the grid behind the meter, like, okay, that's a lot of words. So generally, the traditional like facility, our houses, our normal businesses, right, they connect to the grid and you get electricity from it as you consume it. They get a bill every month, you pay that. That's what really pulling power is from the grid. There's power plants across the state connected by this big network of power lines that you'll see outside. And so anytime you use power, some power plant somewhere in the state is turning up and turning down if you use it more or less. So that's really just you're pulling power from the grid. It's what we do every day. Now, if we have behind the meter power, you know, at our houses we have a little electric meter. Some of you may have rooftop solar on your houses. That's also behind the meter. It's physically, here's my house, here's the meter, here's the grid and the rest of the state. It is behind it. So for a data center, this means they're building power plants next to them, basically on their land, whether it's gas, solar, batteries, whatever it may be. Here in Texas, we're blessed with a lot of gas generation, a lot of gas capabilities, so people are using a lot of that. And in that case, they don't need to pull power from the grid or as much power. So that means we don't need as much infrastructure to deliver the power to them. Now, bridge power, that's traditionally used as a term where people want to pull all their power from the grid. In the case of these data centers, it's usually more reliable, more cost effective for them, but that's going to take a long time. So in the short time, they're going to build some power plants right next to their facility to generate their power to allow them to start up and start running. For these facilities, they have what's called speed to power. How fast can they get power is a huge consideration. The quicker they can get it, the faster they can go online and they can start contributing, because it really is a race with other countries, as you mentioned, so that's something that's really important to them.
How would you compare our ability to do that versus other states? Just curious.
Yeah, in Texas, generally we've had a pretty good regime for behind the meter power generation. We've had constructs on that for oil and gas facilities for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Now with the new data centers, it's a bit of a different story and something that we're actively working on in conjunction with the Public Utility Commission. So they have a rulemaking going on and some processes to look at, okay, you want to put a power plant behind the meter? Well, there's some cost allocation issues that's the domain of the commission, and so we're working, with them to support them through that. But as a whole, Texas is a very good place to do that.
And well, the behind the meter power versus tapping the meter power. Mm-hmm. What's the of the data centers that are going in? What's the mix of those?
So I don't have those numbers directly offhand, but long term, most of the facilities want to pull power from the grid. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, they all have backup for the most part. Not everybody, but most of them have backup power, gas generators like you would have for your house, but for their facility. So if something goes wrong, they have a couple hours to safely shut everything down and make sure there's no damage. There are quite a few places looking for behind the meter. Can't give you exact numbers on it, but it is a pretty popular thing right now for folks to consider.
Okay, so here's a question that I think most folks in here are concerned about. With this kind of demand on power, what is this going to do to residential electric bills?
So that's a really important question, right? Energy costs make up a good component of everybody's bills, mine included. In fact, we all use electricity. And that's something that the Public Utility Commission is working on with the PUC project 58481. Let me just double check the numbers on that one because there's a lot of numbers and a lot of projects going on. So it's a priority for ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission to make sure that these costs aren't passed to ratepayers like yourselves here. So there's a regulatory framework being designed by the Public Utility Commission that was requested, and that's sort of being looked at to say, how do we make sure these data centers pay their cost without imposing it on everybody here? And so there's a couple key components. So in the last legislative session, Texas Senate Bill 6, which is the bill that ordered, a number of these projects to be started, began. So this bill project is underway. And so what we're looking at, and keep in mind everything I say is preliminary, it's still under rulemaking by the Public Utility Commission, it may change. They're looking at, if you want to come to the grid, you have to pay $50,000 per megawatt just to sort of get in the door. 20% of that is refundable if you back out. And then as the project progresses, you're going to have financial security requirements and you're going to have more fees. There's another fee of $50,000 a megawatt that becomes non-refundable the further you go along. And then as you go through, you need to maintain site control and demonstrate, yes, I have the ability to build on this land. I'm not just some fly-by-night company. Now, as they get further along, a lot of these places need a new substation or power lines like that you see outdoors to connect them. And that's expensive, and that's something that everybody's considering. So these large loads and large data centers are required to pay this cost called construction and aid of contribution. And so they need to pay for these substations, they need to pay for these lines. So that way this cost is not getting passed on to, everyday consumers and residential customers. Now, these payments become non-refundable. So even if they say, if something changed, tough luck, I constructed 80%, I'm walking away. All these costs are already paid for and they're covered by the data center. So they can't just, back out and leave us with the bill. That's the framework that the commission is operating with as they design these principles. And so they also need to pay for power. It's one thing to construct the facilities, but they need to pay for it like you or I pay for power. So when that comes, they need to buy their energy through the ERCOT market, and they're responsible for paying those costs. That's not passed on to any of us. So all that is being considered and worked on to make sure, the key principle, these costs should not be borne to all of us here, when it's directly to service a large data center.
Okay, John, we weren't going to forget about you. Let's talk about water. So how's water used relating to data centers? What are the different types of cooling options? What does it mean when we hear closed loop system? Are data centers using gray water, rainwater? Is water used for fire suppression, for example? Now, that's only 10 questions at one time, but take it from there.
So typically, there's three uses of water on the data center sites. Domestic, of course, that's what the employees use during the day when they're working. There aren't a whole lot of employees at those locations, so that's relatively small. Irrigation, just like any business park, you'll have landscape irrigation, relatively small, pretty comparable to other industrial sites you would have in your community. And then of course the big one, which is cooling, if water is used for cooling. And that's the concern that communities have, and that's a potentially really big cost. So what are the cooling options? There's generally three of those. There's new technology being tested that'll maybe expand those numbers in the future. Water cooled, so you're using water through chillers to cool the air. Very water intensive when they do that. There's air cooled, which is just like big air conditioners, right? You're keeping those chips as cool as possible. Very energy intensive when you're doing air cooled. And then more recently, what we're seeing a lot more of is the closed loop system. So they're using the water through the chillers to cool it, but rather than discharging it and bringing more water in, they're recycling it, and they're using it over and over and over. And so once they've used it, the water's heating. It then has to be chilled, energy use, and then reused. So the water goes way, way down, energy is still pretty high. Those are the three options that are typically used right now. As I said, there's a lot of new technology coming in, looking at other alternatives, but they're really not predominant. I'm not seeing them in use, I'm seeing them in research discussions. Now you gotta remember your next question here.
Can you use gray water?
Gray water.
Yeah.
Absolutely, gray water. The back end of the wastewater treatment plants.
Sure.
It's an absolute wonderful use of that resource. Vast number of our 1,200 cities in Texas are just discharging the treated wastewater into the streams and creeks. That's a pretty valuable resource. So if we can treat that to a little higher quality, generally, that could be taken to the data centers and used for cooling. It'd be a wonderful use of that resource.
What about catching rainwater? It doesn't rain anymore in Texas, but I mean, on the off hand that it would.
If we rain a little more, I think that they may want to, the developers may want to invest in that. I haven't seen it, and I think it's just too big of a risk that they wouldn't have the availability when it doesn't rain for 6 months, 9 months
Right.
straight, and then it rains, a year's worth in a week.
Is toxic water being discharged? Doesn't sound like it is, but
There's a lot of concern about what is the discharge, what's coming out of these systems. Typically what's going out is what's coming in. So the water that's being put into the chillers is then going through. If you're using it once, it's pretty similar water to what the source water was.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the water sits in the chillers for a while. There's potential for algae growth, and so disinfectants may need to be used. Chlorine should be the primary disinfectant. It's what's in our water already to disinfect it. So that shouldn't be too inconsistent with what's already going in. Potentially when you're doing a closed loop system, you've got the constant reuse of water. There's also the evaporation during that process. So you're losing water as you go along, but you're leaving the constituents that were in the water, whatever was already naturally there, whether it's high iron or manganese or whatever happened to be in your water to begin with. It could be higher concentrations when discharged.
Good question related to that is, does that mean that that East Texas or east of 35 would be a more desirable place to locate data centers as opposed, a place like Sweetwater or even Abilene? Of course, they landed the humongous one, or Lubbock or Amarillo, where the water they lose to evaporation is just like mind-boggling. Would that be an issue?
Not really, because evaporation is relatively controlled, and it is heat causing it. It's not being exposed to sunlight. Really, from a water source, it's where you are in East Texas. What's the quality of the water there? What minerals are naturally in the water there versus Central Texas versus anywhere else? It's just those natural constituents.
So that's a location factor then. The purity, so to speak, of the is that the municipal water supply generally?
That's correct. It'd be municipal water supplies. Also, some locations just have hot water. It's not uncommon to have water temperature, especially water that's groundwater that's relatively deep in the ground. It comes out pretty hot. That's not a good starting point if you want to chill your data centers with it.
Interesting. Who pays for the? Well, let me ask one other question related to a lot of the folks in this room. Is there an effect on water pressure for folks if you're pulling it from a municipal water system?
Well, it really depends on the infrastructure that's in place in that community and what infrastructure is added, what's expanded into the system with new elevated tanks, bigger booster pumps, a bigger line that's run over to the facility. That's all controlled by, engineering and construction. If done right, you can eliminate that as a concern.
Who pays for the infrastructure, the water infrastructure to the data center?
Once again, it's kind of a locally controlled answer. If the community wants to incentivize the data center to come in, they may give them some breaks on the infrastructure costs and spread that cost out in the community, or they can put those costs directly to the data center and the developers of those projects. And that's typically what's done, but if the community chooses that path, they can put all those costs on the data center.
I'm going to keep you on here and throw this question to the others as well, but start with you. Environmental issues, pollution, noise, impacts on wildlife, traffic, light pollution, health effects, e-waste, creation of heat islands, all those kinds of things have been brought up in discussions, fires. Can you speak to those, and are data centers doing anything to mitigate those issues?
So we'll start with, kind of tie that back to a previous question. In the closed loop systems, when the constituents get concentrated a little more, those are getting generally discharged into the community's wastewater system. And, community of Hillsborough, relatively decent size, has a lot of flow already. That concentrated flow probably has a relatively minimal impact. But a community of, a quarter the size, that could be a much different issue that needs to be looked at. Traffic, other than during construction, it's a relatively low employee type business. Other industries would have much more traffic. There's mitigation for sound, there's mitigation for light. A lot of that needs to be negotiated by the local communities to make sure, those protections are there. I don't know that I have too much experience on the other components.
When you say sound, is that like a hum?
A hum from generators or chillers or blowers, motors. There's sound attenuation devices that can be put in to protect against that. I think that's for the community to push to make sure those protections are there. So if there are residential neighbors nearby, that they're protected from that.
What do you all know? I'm tossing this out to anyone who wants to take it. About repurposing crypto mining operations to data centers. Has anybody had any experience visiting with anybody who's done that?
I haven't.
I know it's out there, but I don't know any real world experiences.
The data centers that we're seeing from a state standpoint are a lot more advanced technologically than they were when the Bitcoin data centers came. Those were kind of rudimentary, probably weren't as advanced as that. The hyperscalers, the big data companies, they have a lot of money to be able to make their data centers more efficient, work with the communities to make sure that they're good business partners, making sure that they're engaged. It's very important to them that the community wants them there. If the community does not want them there, they're not going to go there, right? So it's important to these data centers, especially the big hyperscalers that are focused on artificial intelligence technology, to be good neighbors. And a lot of them are. They just haven't, they haven't used their public relations to show that, and haven't educated their public communities about that. And
speaking of the hyperscalers, like everybody wants to talk about Abilene and that facility, that's behind the meter power, correct?
a lot of it is, because they want to get up and going as quickly as possible. And probably can't wait as long as they need to through the ERCOT process. However, there are other data centers also that are other companies besides the hyperscalers looking to put in their own data centers. Whether it's a strict information technology type company, but even other manufacturers sometimes have their own little data centers that they put in as well for their own purposes. So it just depends. It just depends.
One more question about Abilene. The power there, and it's my understanding that one of the location factors was gas lines coming through that area where they could set up gas-powered plants. Is that correct? And then I'm taking it to the next level, and anybody can jump in on this. Could you power a data center or a hyperscaler facility like that one with wind, solar, and batteries?
I would imagine you could, and a lot of these data centers are looking for green alternatives because they want to be socially responsible to the environment.
Right.
But in order to get our energy, gas has to be used in some way. So we see the gamut in that, right? And so it really has changed. It's very interesting. The artificial intelligence technology boom or race, I guess, to the top has created this demand. And so we are, the state is doing its best to address that. And there is an interim charge in data centers that the House has, and in the State Appropriations Committee that happened April 9th. And if you're very interested in learning about what data centers are doing now, they had 4 experts in the data center field testify to the committee. It's been recorded. It's on Texas Legislature Online, and they spent a good 30 to 50 minutes talking to the legislators on the dais about the industry and about the energy market and what's going on now, and the message that they're basically that they haven't shared with the public, because even the legislators are uncertain as to what's happening in this industry right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to say this and be politically correct. It's amazing how much they don't know, okay? I mean, they're kind of like the rest of us in terms of the impact.
And it may be an industry shortcoming where they haven't provided that education to the public,
right,
to understand where things stand now with the technology efficiencies and advances that have occurred.
I think that's a really good suggestion, recommending to the folks gathered today to go and listen to that.
It's very detailed. I'm surprised.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know there's also concern about, and I threw this out when John was talking earlier about fires. Is there any kind of inherent fire danger in these facilities? Or is that just sort of a rumor?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's been any increased number versus other industries.
Yeah.
For as far as fire suppression, certainly water will be used for that, just like it would for anything else. They're going to need pretty high flow to make sure that we can, our local fire departments can put those fires out. But I'm not aware of it. It could be, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, just urban myth, right? Larry, I want to go back to you. What about the job generating, job generation rather of data centers? I know it's all over the map, but
Yeah.
let's say one that would locate in Hillsborough, Hill County. What would that look like in terms of jobs?
Yeah, so John kind of touched on it a little bit. You're looking anywhere from, 20 to 100 jobs, maybe 200, depending on the size and what the need is of the data centers.
And tell us about those jobs. What are these people?
There's engineers, there's software engineers,
So we're
there's
talking
maintenance jobs, technological jobs, and then regular, security type job, administrative type jobs, all jobs tied to that, and they pay very well. As high as between the close to 60,000 up to 200,000, depending on what the positions do. It's a very if a community is looking to add to its tax base This is a very large investment, and the jobs that come with it in this industry, if it's 20 jobs, 25 jobs, a rural community can handle 20, 25 jobs, get good paying jobs, and bring in revenues. So it's attractive to rural communities because of that. Again, each rural community or each community needs to determine what it wants to accept in terms of a potential business, but that's where the company would be engaged with the local economic development group, the local community partners, the government, to ensure that it makes sense for that community.
Yeah, I had an interesting call not too long ago from the city secretary, although in most places in Texas it's pronounced city secretary. I got a call from the city secretary in Dickens, Texas. Anybody know what Dickens is? Well, Dickens is like the hometown of the 4 Sixes Ranch, and I mean, you talk about remote, you're talking about remote. Well, they've got a data center coming in, and I'm like, I'm saying, ma'am, who's going to staff 217 people in Dickens, Texas? And she said, well, it's only going to be 20 employees, But they've got man camps. That's probably not politically correct to refer to as man, but they've got camps, construction camps there building the data center, which I just thought that was fascinating. So you've got that on one end of the spectrum, you've got Abilene on the other.
And for a community like that, you're bringing in more revenue.
Lots of revenue.
20 new jobs. The service to the new job creation or the added population isn't going to take a lot of that revenue to service it. So it becomes a net benefit for a community.
Big time. I mean, they're gonna, they're really gonna enjoy the tax benefits, no doubt. Lots of construction jobs, right? I mean, hundreds. In the case of Abilene, thousands of jobs. Yeah. What about you? Touched on it too. I'm going to direct this one back to you as well, Larry. What are the financial, the tax-based impacts? You have some examples maybe of the new taxes generated by.
Yeah, it's hard. We're very high level at the state level, right? And so we don't get involved in the nitty-gritty on that stuff. Yeah. We don't get involved in the nitty-gritty. But when you're talking about billions of dollars of investment, and a lot of that billions of dollars gets taxed from a property tax or even a sales tax, because they use servers and have to replace the servers every so often. Now the state does have an incentive on sales tax exemption for data centers up to a certain point, but at some point it limits out, and then there's taxes that get collected on it. So it's a big impact for a community on their property tax and if sales tax where applicable. And so just generally that's the kind of size that you're seeing. It's very interesting that right now I would say we have about 400 projects that we work in a pipeline. We do not work every project in the state of Texas, just so everybody knows. There's just too many projects, but when we get engaged with a community, they bring a project to us, and I would say we have more than 50 projects that have more than $1 billion of investment throughout the state of Texas. Very large interest, and they're not all data centers, by the way.
Right.
We're working, out of the 400, we're probably working about 30 data centers at the most, maybe, but most of these data centers go directly to the community partners. And they hire real estate guys to go and find the properties, and they start developing, and they find developers, and the developers are the ones working with those data center folks as well. And then the data centers and the developers work with the economic development groups and the community, the city governments to basically hopefully have that relationship to determine whether or not it makes sense for them to be in that community.
And the legislature created an incentive program for data centers, 10 years ago?
Yes.
It was little used until the last year and a half. It's crazy.
I think we've seen this trend of data center interest for towards the end of 2023, all of 24, all of 25, and it just keeps growing.
Yeah, yeah. Back to you, Rick. Any other observations that you'd like to share before we get to kind of wrapping this up, and I'll go back to you then. Anything you want to talk about in terms of ERCOT and ERCOT's role in all this?
You asked a question earlier about environmental impacts.
Yeah.
And I'll just figure to add a few words onto that. So, from our perspective, right, at ERCOT, we are solely looking at the power perspective. So, when we look at that, and I'm going to look really at, if they try to build a power plant on site, so behind the meter, that's going to have an environmental impact. Pretty much all power plants do. And that's really important for, the state to consider, for ERCOT to consider. It's something that we're all here about, and it's important to us. So when someone seeks to build a power plant on the ERCOT system, they have to go through a process called the interconnection process, and ERCOT reviews, a lot of testing, a lot of designs to make sure everything works, but is up to standard that we have in the state, to make sure the grid is reliable, to make sure it doesn't have any bad impacts. And so one of those checks that we do is we look to see, do they have the right environmental permits? And so, there are state agencies like the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that are responsible for, air, water, environmental regulations and monitoring and all that. And so during that interconnection process, they have to tell us, yes, I've gotten my, air permit or water permit, whatever they need, depending on the fuel type. If you're a gas plant, you may need different permits compared to a solar plant, for example. And so that's part of the process, and ERCOT looks to make sure, hey, did you get these permits? And they're required to tell us and, provide attestations that everything is above board and proper. So that's definitely a really important issue, and it's something, as part of the interconnection process that we look to make sure that they have those necessary permits that have been given to them by partners in the Texas state agencies.
Where are we? Let's start with Larry on this one. Where are we in the demand cycle? When you hear about data centers in the country, you hear Texas, Virginia, Arizona. How are we compared to the other states? Where is this going to go? When's the build out? Is this a 5-year thing, 10-year thing?
I don't know where the build out is. You're talking about artificial intelligence now, and then you're talking about quantum computing next. So I don't know where the build out is. I do know that Virginia theoretically still has the most data centers, but with the demand that we've gotten, we could easily surpass the number of data centers that Virginia has. And I think we have a staff member who is focused on data centers, and she was telling me that it appears that if we had all these data centers located, we'd be at about 900 data centers here in the state of Texas, which is quite a large. That's just just a comment. There's no, just so everybody knows that. I don't have a source that I'm putting that towards, but it's something that we've heard. The ERCOT requests and the demands that they're seeing, it's my understanding about 87% of the demand has come from data centers. So it's a big, huge interest now. Whether it continues or not depends on what the technologies of the future are. Artificial intelligence today, quantum computing tomorrow, it could very well last for a period of time, and depends, unless something else is developed or invented to replace the computer or what it is that we're using now for the technology that we use.
John, tell us a little bit more about your experiences and what you're seeing, as the president of an engineering consulting firm. Your work around the state.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing this ramp up. It's changed completely. The volume of generation they need. Power generation is just escalating. The water use as well. All throughout the state, we're seeing data centers being talked about, data centers being proposed. I saw a similar study that suggested when you add up existing, under construction, and announced data centers, Texas passes Virginia for number one. So, and with technology changing so quickly, who would have predicted 10 years ago that AI would come in and do what it has, much less what quantum will, whatever's next that's beyond my capacity to understand or predict. It is the future. It is very much going to impact our future, Texas, and in any state that wants to grow and be part of prolonged economic development.
Is there a chance we could overbuild?
Wow, that's a question I don't know I can answer.
And here's another thing that's crossed my mind is, will they eventually all be owned by Google, Meta, Tesla, or Grok, or whatever,
It's hard to know, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to know. Will something be invented to replace
Yeah.
what we're doing, right? From an economic development standpoint, what happens is if you're in a community, there's two ways to go. You're either growing or you're not growing. Back in the 80s, the state of Texas, we had a lot of scenarios where we were not growing. And if you were around at that time, you saw how everything was depressed in those days. Oil and gas was like $8 a barrel. Now it's $100 a barrel. It's pretty amazing. And banks were failing left and right? And so I don't think you want to be in a situation where you're losing your growth, your economic growth. But there's no middle ground in economic development.
Let me ask you another question, because a two-part question, because it relates to something that we're all interested in. Does the demand created by data centers affect our ability to attract sort of traditional manufacturing, petrochemicals, traditional sort of industries?
I think as long as we can manage our resources, that shouldn't be a problem. And that's what ERCOT is doing, that's what the PUC is doing right now, to make sure that we're managing the resources here in the state of Texas to be able to do that. Again,
that's one of those urban myths that's out there. You probably know that. I mean, there's folks in our world that talk about that. Well, I don't know if we can compete for manufacturing anymore with all the data centers going on around us.
Yeah, well, I think we have enough, from the state standpoint, our state agency partners, our economic development partners at the state level are managing those interests. And the Public Utilities Commission and ERCOT and the Texas Water Development Board and the legislators are all evaluating that, and that's why we go to session every 2 years to address issues that maybe if we're overreaching in one area, things kind of get leveled out so that we're not going one way too far one way.
One other question related to the location factors. I mean, is Mexico going to be able to locate data centers that support operations in Texas? Are we going to have that kind of globalization, internationalization of data centers?
I don't know the answer to that. It depends on what their electric grid structure is in Mexico, right? So do they have the infrastructure in place to be able to manage to handle that, right? By far, the United States, can do that. We're very fortunate to have, as a state, our own grid within the borders of the state of Texas that the state of Texas can manage in some way, the public can manage in some way. So, it comes down to public policy, comes down to, resources to be able to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to service that, both residential and commercial.
Got a question for Eric. How far away are we from having data centers in space?
That's an interesting question.
I didn't
It's
smoke
a hot
anything
topic.
before.
You know, I'm an engineer by training. I think there's a lot of complexities to deal
Yeah.
with that. There's a lot of smart people working on it though, so if they can figure it out, I'm sure they will. I think for the short term at least, we're going to see most of our data centers on land. Still very expensive to launch things in this space. So, the growth is just stunning that we had. And since the end of 2025, the amount of large loads that wanted to connect to ERCOT has more than doubled. So we're up to about 410 gigawatts now, which is about 5 times the demand of the state. And we know that not all of that is going to be built, but ERCOT is, working hard and fast, along with the partners at the Public Utility Commission and the Texas Legislature, to figure out how do we make that resource available to everybody, as you said, and make sure that it can be done in a reliable manner. Because, at the heart of our mission is to make sure the lights stay on for everybody, and that's what we're aiming to do.
Nice wrap up, young man. I want y'all to thank Eric, and Larry, and John. I thought they did a fabulous job today. Let's give them a round of applause.
There we go. Well, you stole my thunder a little bit, but I want to thank you too, Carlton. Thank you guys for being here, for sharing your knowledge. It's really helpful to us as we evaluate these decisions. Thank you to everyone here for taking some time with us, for submitting your questions. As you know, we collected these questions in advance and provided them as a courtesy to make sure that this time was efficient, that the questions that were being addressed were things that you guys were interested in. So we hope that you got some answers to some questions that you had, but this conversation is continuing and there's no end in sight. So if you have a question that didn't get answered, something you want to dig deeper in, something new that came up as a result of this, there's sheets outside at the registration table. Please submit questions, submit them to the Go Hillsborough Facebook page. You can send them to hedc@hillsboroughTX.org, and we're going to continue to find resources like these guys to get us the questions or the answers to those questions that we need as we make this decision as a community and as a region. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you at next year's summit.
Hello.
You're going to be posting that online, aren't you?
This is posted online. I'm still streaming. Would you like to say anything since you didn't get to speak at the thing? Hi.
Hi, I was going to ask, can I get a copy of that, or are you?
This is on my Facebook page, Amy Teal, Teal. And I know people didn't get to speak here. If you want to speak, I'm still streaming, so you're welcome to say anything.
Well, I'm here, taking notes for my dad who couldn't be here.
Yep. And I saw that Channel 25 had a mic up on the stage too. So I'm wondering if they're outside.
Channel 10 was here too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Amy Teal, Teal.
Is that Amy with the Y or an I?
AMY.
All right.
You got it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, there's a camera over there. Hey.
Well, good. You can think of another one. Let me know.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. I was going to say. Okay, so this was the Data Center Summit. And there's a lot of people in there. I should probably just go back inside. I think there's still people going to be looking for the camera.
No, right? I should.
Okay, so I've got, this was the program, and I pulled the text from the bios and put them in a comment. I took pictures of this and put it in a post on my page, and the links to these pictures are in the caption of this video. So you've got a lot of the info from Go Hillsboro. Yes, I'm here. And I know you didn't get to see. Would you like to say something to the camera about what you Well, and it will have some.
Oh yeah.
I was just
Sure. Here.
I'll ask the
Go
question
ahead.
I was going to turn in.
Yeah.
So, say you live here and your neighbor decides to sell their property and they make big bucks, but you want to stay here. So when the next year comes around and you've got to pay your property taxes, are your property taxes going to be valued on that sale of that larger property, which might tax you out of your home? That's a question I have.
A lot going on in the world.
Yeah. You bet. Want to say anything?
No, mine was a smart ass question.
Well, this is a smart ass street. So we can say whatever we want on
I
here.
drive
I'm
down
better off
the street and I say, oh, there he is. I see it.
You're good.
I'm just responding to what he said. He said that they only go into communities that they are wanted in. Why are they here? Why are they here if they only go?
Yep.
Harry, I'm Will Lowry.
I actually wrote it down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. So yeah, I streamed it and I just let you know so you just keep the filter out of the it looked like channel 25 and channel 10. So
Well, like, if you got here early, they had an out. They had a lot of work.
Okay. That's all right. My memory. We're good to go.
some counties are doing that, and some counties and cities are taking significant risk in doing so. There is, I don't know if you guys saw a question on the state of county, but someone shared a thing about people having to keep in mind that the city council commissioners can't just be in certain districts arbitrarily. Otherwise, they can get sued. And hey, I was just telling them. And I was just
Unmet expectations. I am very thankful you're there. Very thankful.
to violate the rights.
When it's to the bill.
That's where the state is from. The state has a better
They have not much of the rest when it goes to the
I'm sorry, but your name's still, I heard it.
I don't want to wait until you're supposed to be trying to get them to go to less fertile land. You know, get away from our farmland and take it out to less desirable land area.
I am absolutely mostly I use ChatGPT to extract the text and they're over there. So let's extract the text from pictures so I can post the bio and distribute. But
I don't think did they to my son.
Thank you. I gotta go back to work.
okay, yep.
I'll catch y'all later. Have a good day. I'll take care.
He's got a scramble to sell his house and 5 acres. They don't look like 5 acres. They want to buy 300 acres.
Yeah, they have no, so it's the old adage of if you want your view, buy everything in it. Because you don't control.
Yeah, it's right on his property. Stay in touch.
You bet. Okay. I'm gonna go get a drink.
I can't hardly eat bread. Oh, you did? What you at?
Yes.
Are you okay?
Leaving?
I reckon, unless you need me. You see the name lights? Right. See ya. Anyway, so I guess we're just calling up. What happened? See y'all later. Yes, sir. Good. Yeah. Well, I got the radio. Oh, you are? You do the record and everything.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. I will talk to you guys later. Share this across the state of Texas. These were Texas people discussing Texas issue with data centers. Okay, bye.